Qatar is ready for football's biggest showcase, the FIFA World Cup. But the lead-up has been controversial. Critics are accused of double standards. So how could this event change Qatar and the Middle East? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Sahil Rahman and welcome to this special edition of Inside Story. Qatar has waited 12 years for this moment and it's finally here. The 2022 FIFA World Cup is about to begin. Football's greatest sporting prize will be contested here in the Middle East for the very first time. And over the next month, it's expected that over 1 million football fans will descend on Doha.
Qatar!
Since winning the bid in 2010, Qatar has spent billions of dollars to prepare. The country has built new roads and infrastructure, a new airport, and a new metro system linking new stadiums, some of them modern and innovative, others inspired by the region's history and traditions. But the lead-up has put Qatar under international scrutiny like never before, especially on human rights issues and the treatment of migrant workers. So we'll take a look at the impact of the World Cup on and off the pitch, and how it'll change Qatar and the region long after the final whistle. Here at Al Jazeera, our journalists are working hard to provide a unique perspective on the world's biggest sporting event. We'll have special coverage throughout the whole of the tournament. Let's bring in our guest for today's edition of Inside Story. Joining me now is Ross Griffin, Middle East editor for the International Journal of the History of Sports, and Faisal Al-Mudakha, editor-in-chief of the Gulf Times. And from along in Cameroon, Chansalis Nansé, a sports reporter at Cameroon Radio and Television. Welcome to all of my guests here on this edition of Inside Story. But first, let's speak to Khalifa Al-Haroun. He's the founder of iloveqatar.net that provides information about events in Qatar. Good to have you on the programme. Good to have you with us on the programme. Gianni Infantino said just a short while ago on the eve of the event, "Today I feel Qatari, today I feel Arab, today I feel African, today I feel gay, today I feel disabled, today I feel like a migrant worker." One gets the impression that Infantino is saying that we should all be proud of who we are and what we've achieved in bringing the World Cup to the Middle East, despite the issues and the problems that Qatar has experienced from the global community.
Absolutely. And I think the message is very clear. The message is that we are all unique, and it's football that's supposed to be bringing us together so that we can not only share in each other's uniqueness, but also share each other's culture with each other and learn from each other too. And I think it's a responsibility of every individual to care about their neighbor. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of the amazing people from around the world and all of their different backgrounds coming over and having a great time.
It's a very friendly message that you're portraying, but it hasn't been an easy message for Qatar or the Arab world to get out these past few years. Within the last decade or so, we've seen the Arab Spring arise across the Middle East, creating turmoil for the region. Also, Qatar itself, a victim of a blockade, an illegal blockade that was lifted. It lasted nearly 4 years. The outside world looking at the Middle East thinking, is this really the right place to host, such a huge event? I mean, it's been a hard messaging campaign as well.
Well, I mean, if we look at history, we look all over the world, we'll see that some countries have had hundreds, if not thousands of years to go through a lot of turmoil and trouble and problems, and are still going through problems, today. And here in the Middle East, I think there's no doubt that anybody could say, that the people here haven't been suffering. There's been a lot of suffering in the region. And one of the really amazing things about us having the opportunity to host the World Cup is that at least for a moment, we can all, first of all, showcase what we really stand for, who we really are, and forget about all of the troubles and the problems that we've been facing over the past 10, 20, 30 years. And so I think the message, that we want to share is that, listen, it's time for us to have a chance. And again, it's the World Cup. That means that it's a chance and an opportunity for everyone from all over the world, from any country, to one day host the World Cup. And I think that's the dream, right? That as an individual, you might be playing football outside, just right in front of your house, thinking that one day I'm going to be part of a club and then a national team, and I'm going to represent my country, maybe in the World Cup. And similarly, countries also have the ambition that maybe one day I also have the opportunity to host the great game too.
And indeed,
So we've
if I
been
just jump in
suffering.
there very quickly, because the optimism is great, but at the end of the day, Qatar in itself, in these past 10 years, has received a great deal of criticism over various issues. I just wondered what your take was on it, considering you are so active on various social platforms and you do promote Qatar, and what sort of either abuse you've had or you've read abuse that you've been upset about.
So, I mean, first of all, let me start off with the fact that hosting the World Cup is an event that we all know that every single spotlight, every single magnifying glass is going to be on the country. This is known from day one. And the way that I see it, this is a great opportunity so that we can hear from experts from around the world to tell us, hey, maybe there are a couple of issues here and there. I mean, maybe there are many issues as well, and gives us the opportunity to fix them. I feel like when it comes to criticism, of course, there are some valid criticism. There is sadly criticism based off of misinformation, that's out there. And I feel like there's no acknowledgement of all of the positive change that's happened in the country. So I definitely feel I feel a bit emotional in the sense that so many people, myself included, have really been working hard to make Qatar and the world a better place. But it seems like that's just dismissed, and we're only focusing on problem after problem after problem, even problems that have already been solved many years ago.
Okay.
So again, I just hope that people can give us a chance and encourage positive change instead of constantly beating us down. And again, I've seen a lot of positive messages, on social media as well. People from all over the world supporting Qatar, backing us, and saying that they stand for what we're doing. And I've even seen some people saying, "Listen, good job, Qatar, with some of the changes that you've done. Now we expect more from you." And honestly, we all expect more. As a Qatari, I expect the best out of my country because Qatar deserves the best. That's a message that you see displayed all over the nation, and we want to show the world that we are a major force for good.
Well, we shall see what the world does make of it during and certainly after the World Cup. For the moment, Khalifa Al Haroon, thanks so much for joining us from Doha.
Thank you so much.
Ross, just hold that thought for a moment, because workers' rights have been under scrutiny in Qatar since it won the right to host the World Cup in 2010. Now, the International Labour Organization, part of the UN, says working and living conditions of hundreds of migrant workers have greatly improved in the past decade. Yet Qatari officials say the country is still coming under criticism and much is misdirected.
Someone talks about 6,500 victims, another says 10,000, and a third one talks about 15,000, as if there was a competition. There shouldn't be any politicizing or using misinformation, so we ask that you refer to official sources like ILO.
Faisal, can I come to you? I mean, obviously, the government officials at very high levels are making it aware to the international community, both media and politicians, as well as the public at large, that some of the criticism is incredibly unfair, despite the fact that there are other countries in the world that also have human rights issues, inverted commas, in their own nations. I mean, how disappointed are you at the way criticism has been directed at Qatar, especially tagged together with the World Cup?
Sure. So, if we go back a little to the history, we are independent. Our independency was in 1971. So we have certain policy that does not fit now. So now we have the World Cup. Our population since that time have doubled. You're talking about 12 years of reform of policy. And I really also think that the reform of policies is done because the World Cup, but it was fast forward. And I think after the World Cup, it will also continue based on the need and to meet the international law. So we are really in a hypocrisy world. Today, you listen to Twitter firing 50% of his employee. Nobody talks. Today, for example, international companies like Nike is being abused in Asia for child laboring. So the criticism goes to Nike itself, does not go to the country. So if you think of Qatar, from the 8 stadium, 7 stadium was built by international respected company that has HEC, which is health, safety, environment measurement, internationally recognized. So where are they? Those companies are they in the spot? No, they cashed out and left. 4 of the metros has been built by international companies. Where are they? So really, I think this is really unfair because Qatar during this time have reformed many. One is the security funds. Second is the minimum wages. Even the accommodation, it's really for Qatar for the policy and enforcement, but it is part of those international companies who wanted to save some money somewhere.
Should have looked after the workers themselves. I mean, that's a debate we'll carry on with in a moment.
Sure.
Let's bring in Shez. Okay, well, we'll come back to you about that because obviously lots of issues being raised, and even, I say 24 hours before the ball is kicked, FIFA's president himself has criticised some of that media coverage ahead of the World Cup, saying that Europe shouldn't be giving what he called moral lessons on human rights.
I think for what we Europeans have been doing in the last 3,000 years around the world, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before starting to give moral lessons to people. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't point at what doesn't work. Here in Qatar as well. Of course, there are still things that don't work and that need to be addressed. But this moral lesson giving, one-sided, it's just hypocrisy.
So Faisal, Gianni Infantino obviously making his mark on the eve of the World Cup itself. What's your reaction to what he has said? Is it too late?
I don't think it's too late. This stereotype of the Arabs, the Middle East, I agree on what he says on lecturing us on human rights and everything. To tell you the truth, I think countries like who's criticizing us, Germany or England or whatever, should use this opportunity for a public diplomacy. To, maybe we forgive them. I mean, the public, it's not me, the public of the Middle East forgive them for what they have done to Iraq or whatever. And, the whole idea of the World Cup is a hub of alliance of civilization. We sit here, we talk, we know each other. But lecturing us from London, whatever, does not really send a good message for the youth. Or does not start a new page.
Ross, what do you make of it? Because obviously, rebuking countries, they sort of merges into the domain of politics, doesn't it? And you expect politicians to be saying these sorts of things, human rights activists, whatever. Gianni Infantino is head of a sports body. He has a very fine line to walk.
Yeah, ironically enough, I don't think his rhetoric helps. I think something like that just reaffirms this us versus them dynamic that existed once in colonial times and it still lingers on. I think that it's very combative and you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, I think. He's making some valid points, but I don't think his tone is going to recognize the culture of change that has come into Qatar because of the World Cup. Massive changes and massive improvements have been made in the last 10 to 12 years. And ILO have recognized this, Amnesty have recognized this, people like Nicholas McGeehan in Fair Square have recognized this. But the debate, I think, isn't about change, it's about the rate of change. And when you have this kind of rhetoric, again, exacerbating this divide of us versus them, it doesn't help things. If anything, it just it widens that distance even further.
The rate of change, gentlemen, and Shalane, we'll come back to that in a moment, because the rate of change has also created the debate over the number of deaths related to World Cup projects and the misconception about the number of people who have died because of World Cup related projects. Lots of numbers have been bandied around globally, but we go by what the International Labour Organization has said and the myths that they want to dispel. They are a UN body. This is what they had to say.
This relates to the total number of South Asian nationals who have died in Qatar over a 10-year period. It doesn't make any distinction between whether these are work-related deaths or non-work-related deaths. In Qatar, the workforce is incredibly diverse. South Asians are working in every sector of the economy across all income levels, and they make up a huge proportion of the overall population, 50 to 60% of the population. The figure of 6,500 is certainly misleading.
Such huge development, Faisal, comes with a price. One death is one death too many for any country in projects like this. But Qatar has actually, as you say, the policy is there from the government. It's the implementation of the companies to make sure that safety is observed. How quickly has Qatar, do you think, had to change to, you might say, come up to the standards of what the international community expect when you put on big events like this?
First of all, back to the statistic, I mean, he have spoke about it very well. A lot of people that doesn't know that the demography of Qatar. Qatar has 85% of expats, 15% of locals. So manipulating the statistic, this is what was going on. Another thing, you have, I think in this case, you have two paths. One is the propaganda, which we really cannot help, and the complex of the white savior complex that we cannot help. Secondly, we have people who are misinformed. So those, I think that's really is our duty to correct that misconception. In terms of policies, I mean, there is the minimum wage was not there. The kafala was not there. Kafala, which, you have somebody in contract and he cannot free move from one place to one place. Second, the third, the most important thing, which a lot of people didn't talk about. As I mentioned, 85%, you have 69 billion Qatari riyal has to transfer to South of Asia because of the people works here. So how many jobs does it create?
Ross, can I just bring you in?